We're talking about arguments that you can make to help your broker negotiate with the underwriters and drive your premium down. And the next section we're going to talk about has to do with arguments surrounding return to work. Most employers are familiar with the concept of return to work, but it's basically the availability of lighter jobs or change jobs that can allow an injured worker to come back to your employment earlier. They're called light duty or modified duty jobs. So, for example, the worker might be injured and have a back injury, and the treating physician prescribes restrictions, work restrictions that say the employee can't lift more than, say, 10 pounds. So you redesign the job that normally would require the employee to lift more than 10 pounds. You redesign the job to say, okay, all the other workers will fill in and do the lifting, and the employee can otherwise do the modified duty job. That has a benefit to the employer in a couple of areas. First, the workers' compensation insurance company is going to pay the employee 2/3 of their average weekly wage, and subject to the maximums. And so the employer can get the employee back for very little cost out of pocket for the employer in terms of having the employee back to work. But the higher value is that once you offer return to work to an injured worker, and if that injured worker takes the return to work position that you've offered to them, then obviously the insurance company no longer has to pay temporary disability payments while they're off work at home. And furthermore, if the injured worker has an attorney, representing them, the attorney, not to get into too much detail, but the attorney largely gets paid based on the permanent disability calculation. And so if an injured worker comes back to work under a modified duty or light duty position, it's harder for the attorney to make the claim that in fact the injured worker is severely injured and is owed permanent disability payments as well, somewhere down the road. And of course, the applicant's attorney, the claimant's attorney, is going to try to make the case to the worker that you will be better off and receive more compensation if you don't accept the return to work offer made by the employer, the light duty or modified duty position that's been made available by the employer. So what the employer does by offering a light duty or modified duty position is basically force the injured worker to make a decision, and that decision is, do I want to continue to receive temporary disability benefits or not? And if I reject the light duty or modified duty position, I am no longer entitled to the temporary disability payments. And that can put a big pressure on the employee to make a decision between their attorney and the employer. So a lot of good reasons to offer return to work. We're going to talk about some of the things you should make known to your broker, so your broker can really convey to the underwriter what a great return to work program that you have, because obviously this has a big impact on reducing claim values going forward. So one of the things to make clear is communication of the value of return to work options to the employees. And what is the value? Well, the value is it allows you to bring injured workers back to work earlier. It's good for their morale. It's good for the morale of other employees at your firm, because they're not burdened entirely with the workload of that injured worker. If they can come back in some modified way, then they can continue to have the benefit of that injured worker. And also the communication to the employees of the value of reducing workers' compensation claims helps everyone over the long term. It helps the business. It can help the employees in terms of additional compensation or the availability of jobs in the future, et cetera. Second, the availability. Convey to your broker the availability of jobs that you have at your firm. Many employers that we talk to have simply taken a position that we are going to make a job available for 100% of any injured workers. I've told this story before, but there was a client I worked with several years ago who told me that their modified duty job for any injured worker that they suspected was bringing a fraudulent claim was to follow the CEO around all day and take notes. And they found that a lot of those workers tended to recover pretty quickly. So convey to the broker the availability of return to work in specific detail if you can. The number of options available, number of types of jobs that you have available. Whether or not the treating physician that you normally work with or the clinic you normally work with has been involved in looking at the return to work options, or if they've reviewed them so that they are familiar with what's available, so that then when they write up the work restrictions for any injured worker, they will know how to fit the restrictions within your return to work jobs, your light duty or modified duty jobs. The percentage of injured workers involved in the past. It could be that in the past you had a return to work program that made light duty or modified duty jobs available to 70% of your employees, but you felt that the other 30%, it was just too complicated to try to fit them into an artificial job. But now you've expanded return to work, and so now light duty or modified duty jobs are available to all of your employees. Make sure you convey that change. Underwriters love to see positive changes in the last few years to your exposures. Last few issues, time limitations. If you have any time limitations on light duty or modified duty jobs, convey that to your broker, especially if those time limitations are very long indeed, because that can encourage the underwriter that you've got a really aggressive return to work program. If you've got positions in writing, share that with the broker. Have the broker convey that to the underwriter. That will show real concrete evidence of your commitment to return to work as a concept. Let the broker know if you've had any site visits from the treating physician. Some employers decide to have the treating physician come on site to actually review not only their return to work program, but also to meet the workers. That's a really good way to reduce future claims because, as I've said before, when injured workers are familiar with a physician in advance of any injury, they feel more comfortable. They're less likely to go get an attorney if they feel like, oh, I know that doctor. He was on our at our plant here a few weeks ago, and so they're less likely to get nervous and get an attorney. And then lastly, this can be a complication where you're charging back return to work jobs to a supervisor or a department. And so, for example, if you have light duty jobs where the supervisor feels, geez, my department is getting charged for the compensation we're paying to that employee when they come back, but they're really not much use to me when they come back in this light duty job. There can be some conflict there, and supervisors can resist having people come back in a light duty or modified duty position. One step that many employers have taken is simply to charge that injured worker to overhead and not charge it to any one department, so that there's no disincentive for supervisors to bring injured workers back. So however that works, convey it to your broker and they can help make arguments to the underwriters.